My question is this the first time you ever heard of an agent reaching out to a team saying, hey, this is what we'll take it or leave it?
It was new to me. Jim Duquette, who was, of course, part of Sirius and SNY here in New York, he was the first to sort of relay that. And when I saw that, I was like, that's interesting.
Here we go. Will Sammon from The Athletic joining us right now on Foul Territory. You got the whole crew here today. Will, thanks for joining us. And I'm just going to get right to business because you put out a great notes column, and we'll get to Pete Alonso, but I'll just start this way. Will, do you think that we're going to see some of those 2-3 year deals with opt-outs after each year that are rolling out for players beyond Pete Alonso, where it would be unexpected?
We certainly could. And thanks for having me on, guys. Yeah, I think with both a couple of those guys that we mentioned beyond Pete Alonso, whether it was Anthony Santander or Jack Flaherty, those were two players that, from what we gathered, from what we understood, those guys were looking for longer term deals. But they have to sort of look at the market and see what the market is telling them, and they're still there. So perhaps they're not going to get those contracts that they may have were seeking in the first place. So they have to be open to it at the very least. But like we always say, it only takes one team, right, to make that sort of offer to kind of go above and beyond, or to kind of meet the player where he wanted to be anyway. So there's certainly a possibility that it doesn't come to that. But clearly, with the Alonso news of him being open to it, or at least open to it as it pertains to the Mets, it has to be something that other players have to consider as well.
Can you give us a little insight into Alonso, what the possible AAV is? Because if he's downgrading himself from, the reports were Prince Fielder, that's since been squashed. But you think 5 years is what he was thinking. Now, if he's telling the Mets, okay, 3 years, are we looking at possibly a record-setting AAV with like an opt-out type of thing for Pete?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, his agent is Scott Boras. And so usually when guys are going to sort of either concede in terms of the years or whatever, they're going to want to have the team or the club meet them halfway, right? Or at least meet them with something else. And that something else could very well be a record AAV. From the Mets standpoint, though, I mean, they just did a deal with Sean Manaea, and Sean Manaea will talk to reporters today for the first time. So that's top of mind for me. But they did a deal with Sean Manaea that included deferrals to also bring that AAV down a bit. So that's something that has also been on my mind as well, in the context of Alonso. Could that be something that comes to mind as for Alonso's deal, the idea of deferrals? He's also obviously a Scott Boras client, Sean Manaea, so it wouldn't be unheard of in the context of the Mets here. But yeah, I think that's certainly something that could be a possibility. When I first started reporting the Alonso Mets talks negotiations, it did seem to me that contract length was a sticking point. And look, I mean, from Boris's standpoint, from Alonso's standpoint, Christian Walker got a few years, right? So I think it only makes sense to ask for more when you're Pete Alonso and you are younger and you have that track record that he has. Now, again, like I said above about the market as it pertains to some other players, the market just may not be telling him that that's there for him, unfortunately. So the best thing for him could be to take that kind of deal, but we'll see what that means as far as the Mets and their willingness to go to sort of a record-setting AAV for that short-term arrangement, or perhaps something similar.
My question is this the first time you ever heard of an agent reaching out to a team saying, hey, this is what we'll take it or leave it? You don't usually hear about a player going to a team saying, hey, I'll take 3 years. I know I was looking for 5 or 6 or the Prince Fielder deal, but guess what, Mets? I'll take 3 years to come back. It's a weird situation because I've never heard of that before. Usually Scott Boras just sits back and lets team come to him. This time he's actually aggressively going out there.
It was new to me. Jim Duquette, who was, of course, part of Sirius and SNY here in New York, he was the first to sort of relay that. And when I saw that, I was like, that's interesting. It's definitely something different. But, this is a different type of situation with Pete Alonso and the Mets. I mean, he's a homegrown guy, fan favorite. Fans here really appreciate him. I know he didn't have the season that maybe he wanted to, but even so, it was still a pretty darn good season. When you look and take a step back and just look at the raw numbers there, like they're still pretty solid. We're talking about somebody that's sort of proven in New York, is as durable as he gets, plays almost every single day, not an everyday player, plays every single day. And of course, his power is elite. So it's kind of a weird situation, or a different situation, unique, I guess maybe be the best word for it. And just his relationship with the Mets, I think, is something that really matters here. And so if he wants to continue to be a Met, this may be the best avenue for him.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of strange because you heard that what Boris came out and said, and then all of a sudden, like it's been kind of hush if you want the truth, like this whole kind of scenario. Besides what he came out, I want to ask you a question about the Mets as well. Do you think, say they get Pete Alonso or they don't get him, what's the next move for them? I mean, I'm sure they have another move that they're going to have to get. Man, maybe it's another relief pitcher. I mean, say they get Pete Alonso, are they done? Do they have other things in store, you think, or is that's going to be the final piece?
Oh, no, definitely. The Mets still have some work to do here. Clearly, their big move was Juan Soto. But then since then, I had reported around that time period that, look, they were going to be aggressive, but they were also going to try to be a little bit smart here with more like that mindful approach to maybe not going so long on contracts. Clearly, Juan Soto, 15 years is in a whole nother realm of a discussion here. But what I'm saying is that they seem to be a little bit more, I guess, cognizant of wanting to do shorter term deals. And so those types of arrangements could be something to look for, whether that's with a relief pitcher. I had reported earlier last week that they had met with Tanner Scott. So he's a name that could be out there for them. There's so many others on the relief market right now. So there's that. Plus, also, I don't know if they'd necessarily be done with the lineup for that matter, even if they were to re-sign Pete Alonso, because we had also reported that they had interest in Teoscar Hernandez. There's been some other guys as well that they've reached out to kind of see if they were open to that sort of short-term arrangement. So they could still use some help at DH or, perhaps a little bit even more with the outfield mix as the, Teoscar Hernandez pursuit demonstrated.
Hey, Will, I want to ask you about the Marcus Stroman trade rumors and how they're pretty complicated right now because of that vesting player option. I actually didn't even realize it was a vesting player option. I remember reading about it, but then forgot that if he hits, I think it's 140, right? Then he can go ahead and give himself another 18 mil for the season after. So how does that complicate things in a world where teams and owners have trouble eating money? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It's an interesting situation for the Yankees just because there's also so many different free agents out there. It almost reminds me a little bit too of like the Mets and their situation with Starling Marte, who's also a trade candidate. There's just so many outfielders that are still available. So part of me thinks like, okay, like if you're interested in someone like Marcus Stroman, why wouldn't you just sign someone similar who is lingering in free agency rather than make a deal? I suppose it depends on the club, right, and what they're willing to part with and what's more attractive to them as far as money or prospect or whatever the cost is. So that's part of it. And that to me, I think is something to really watch out for with the Yankees, just because it seems like they want to free up some money. And Stroman, just because of where the rotation stands and how it's looking right now, it looks pretty good. It looks like that could be an area to trade from. So it seems only logical to me. But the flip side is that there may not be a whole lot of teams that are looking to do that type of deal right now, at least just because of the amount of pitchers who are out there that are accessible via free agency.
If he doesn't get moved, who do you see moving out of that? Because the Yankees are one team that signed big-time pitchers that are not looking to do a six-man rotation. Does Stroman get moved? And does that make a brutal environment for the Yankees? Or because there's a case where nobody picks him up, like you just said.
Right. I've had this conversation with a couple of clubs who are kind of in that similar boat, maybe not as fortunate as the Yankees, but still, like they seem to have like an amount of pitchers that doesn't necessarily reflect a 5-man rotation or even a 6-man rotation. There's clubs out there that could run 7, 6, that kind of thing, whether it's the Arizona Diamondbacks, even the New York Mets have a handful of like those depth type of guys as well. So, the answer that I usually get is kind of a boring one, but it's like, hey, we're still here in the first, second week of January. A lot can change. A lot of injuries can still occur once spring training rolls around. So I don't know. I wouldn't be necessarily surprised to see these teams go into spring training with those sort of surplus of starters, just because you never know. You never know from like internally, like if you're going to have that need arise, it would be good to have that sort of extreme level of depth, but also another team could sort of suffer an injury and they become a little bit more desperate to make a deal with you.
More in a minute, but first, a quick word from our sponsor of this video. Figuring out dinner every night with variety is not easy when you're running around. Let America's #1 meal kit, HelloFresh, help you out.
HelloFresh has over 50 recipes to choose from each week. They pre-portion the ingredients and then ship them right to your doorstep.
If you're looking to fit a specific lifestyle, HelloFresh features preferences like fit and wholesome, quick and easy, or a vegetarian option for you too.
HelloFresh helps you eat healthier and stress less about how you're getting the ingredients and ideas for that perfect home-cooked meal.
In many parts parts of the country, it's cold out. So skip the hassle and snuggle up next to your phone or your computer and pick out your favorite recipes. Then let HelloFresh handle the planning, the shopping, and most of the prep. Get up to 10 free meals and a free high-protein item for life at HelloFresh.com/FT10FM. One item per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's up to 10 free HelloFresh meals. Just go to HelloFresh.com/FT10FM. And now back to the video.
Hey, Will, what's the most surprising thing right now about the current state of the market? Are you surprised that so many relievers are still on the board, some of those mid-range starters? I think if you told me from the top tier that guys like Pete and Bregman were still available, I'd be like, okay, that seems to happen almost every year now. But what about more of the mid-tier guys on the market in other areas?
You know what? I really like Jack Flaherty, actually, as a pitcher. I think that he really proved himself from where I'm sitting with the season that he just had. I know he had to accept the pillow contract last year, heading into last year in the last offseason. But for me, where I'm sitting, I feel like he really shouldn't have to do that. So for me, that's my guy as far as who surprises me the most. I think that a team will be smart to pick him up. Again, at the beginning of our conversation here, I was talking about, hey, the idea of a longer-term deal that he was interested in, and maybe he doesn't end up with that. Maybe he doesn't end up with that 5-year contract, but I think on a 3-year deal or something like that, that's something that a team would be, be in their best interest to land somebody as good as him. Because we have seen teams, do the 1-year type of deal with guys, and I just don't know. I just feel like Jack Flaherty is that guy who's kind of proven, he's demonstrated. You kind of know what you're getting from him at this point.
That was my guy. That was the guy I was going to ask about. Where's Jack Flaherty going to go? What's his market? Because we haven't heard much about him. You kind of beat me to it, but that was like him. Obviously Alonso's a big name. Bregman, we kind of narrowed it down a little bit to the Tigers and the Red Sox possibly. But where is Jack Flaherty? We haven't heard really a peep about him.
Yeah, we did a lot of reporting on him leading up to this week, but lately I haven't heard too much. And I bet like right now, today's the day where like he kind of signs with somebody out of the blue. But that's just always how it goes. But no, we had heard earlier some interest, some mutual interest for that matter, with the Baltimore Orioles before they went out and added a couple of pitchers, including Charlie Morton. So would be a little bit surprised if that was still the case there. Detroit Tigers, kind of same thing, but they've yet to really add to their pitching group there. So we'll see. Other than that, I mean, there are teams that have been kind of floated around within the pitching context, whether it was like the Braves or the Giants or the Blue Jays, like basically like your sort of list of teams that have been thrown around for better or worse when it comes to really any free agent. So other than that, it's been quiet, probably more quiet than I would suspect, just because, like I said, I mean, Jack Flaherty demonstrated a lot for what he's worth just this past year, and he's still on the younger side of things. I mean, he's one of the rare guys who is below the age of 30 still. So I just think he presents a pretty good opportunity for clubs.
My guess is that they're picking on him. Sorry, Kratz, for the situation with the Yankees at the trade deadline.
Where they thought they saw
the Yankees
something
flunked him.
Thought they saw something, maybe the back or something.
He proved to be okay for the most part, but that's my guess. And then other teams are like, oh, well, the Yankees said there was a problem.
Something.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's
my guess.
That's right. I mean, Will, tell me if I'm wrong, but this is where teams are sitting there going, well, and I think you even wrote it. Your exact words were flawed, also an imperfect free agent. Like the teams that don't sign these guys, imperfect free agents. The Mets already signed the one perfect free agent, and he's not really perfect at $765 million. But you sit there and you go, if teams always look at it as, well, what's wrong with his back? What's wrong with? I give the credit to the Blue Jays. They went and got Hoffman. Supposedly two teams failed his physical, and the Blue Jays still went and did it. And the Blue Jays were a team that we criticized for saying, well, it's kind of imperfect. It's kind of imperfect.
Yeah, you're always going to find something wrong with somebody, right? Like you don't have to look too hard to find that with a player. Again, not to bring up a different guy, but also Alonso, same thing. I feel like the entire industry has fixated on the things that he doesn't do quite well, whether it's play like elite defense or whatever. Like how many first basemen are playing elite defense anyway? Like that's not a premier position.
Yep, exactly.
To get that right, you're looking to get defenders who are up the middle, whether at second base, shortstop, center fielder, catcher. At the corners, a lot of front office people, a lot of lead decision makers will say like that's an area where we could be decent at. Like we could afford to be like not as good. So I don't know. I kind of do. I'm with you on that. I kind of get a little bit tired of hearing like about, hey, like this guy's not so great at this, or this guy's not the best at that. Whereas like, hey, with Pete Alonso and other guys, they do some things remarkably well that they should really get some credit for as well. So I feel like that could be said about Jack Flaherty as well. He's a guy who, look, I mean, his strikeout numbers were kind of off the charts. So, I mean, if he's dealing with something, or if he was dealing with something, he did awfully well with that issue. So I like him. Like you said, we could write, and we have written, that there are imperfect free agents, and even Juan Soto at his years and his number of millions of dollars that you had to give him, that's an issue in itself, right? That you had to go that long and that much money committed to him. So there are things with everybody that you can look at. Like the only guys who kind of come to mind that are perfect maybe are like those 20-year-olds, whether it's Yamamoto or Sasaki, who is going to get international money anyway. But that's just it. I mean, in free agency, you're dealing with guys who are around the age of 30. And at this point in their career, they've demonstrated how much they should be valued. But on the other side, there's some mileage there. So like naturally, there's going to be some flaws. But when you're trying to improve your club, you should be looking at what they're doing well in regards to just how much they can help your team out in terms of wins.
This is kind of a Mets question, but also just an overall broad question on the free agent relievers market. It's been kind of quiet. What are we expecting? And are the Mets, because I feel like the Mets at the beginning of the offseason were like, man, if we had a deeper bullpen, we could have maybe taken down the Dodgers. We could have maybe, gone further. Are the Mets a team that are going to be, once this market opens up, the Tommy Kahnleys, the Tanner Scotts, the Kenley Jansens, are we going to get the Mets at the top of this bracket here? Or is David Stearns going to be like, you know what, I built a bullpen out of 40-man roster cast-offs in Milwaukee. We'll do it again here.
So it's interesting that you mentioned the Dodgers in relationship to the relief market, because I've heard that on both sides of it. On the agent side, you'll hear them say like, hey, the Dodgers showed us just how much you should be investing in relievers, because they pretty much rode their bullpen throughout the playoff run and won the World Series. But then on the other side, you talk to some club executives and they're like, well, how many of your casual fans, or even some who are diehards, how many people can actually name their whole bullpen? And how many names do you get to before you start stumbling a little bit with who's who on that list? And that's another sort of point, right? Is that the Dodgers, they kind of built their bullpen a little bit, maybe not internally. They did end up with like waiver claims or signing some guys, but they were a little bit lower on the radar, some of those relievers that pan out for them. And so some teams, like you mentioned, the Mets, they do like to do it that way and save money that route. Because relief pitching, unfortunately, it's more of a volatile position. Of course, you don't know exactly what you're getting year to year from certain guys, even the best ones. But as it goes with the Mets, I think that they're still going to nonetheless add 1 to 2 relievers. And I do know that they are shopping at the high end of that market. Whether or not they get one of those guys remains to be seen. No guarantee there, but they are at least showing that they're operating a little bit differently in regards to their relief pitching than they did their starting pitching, because with the starters, they did not really look too hard at the top end of the market, whether that was Corbin Burns or Max Fried or whoever. They were more content with, Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas, those types of guys. Whereas with the bullpen, they have met with Tanner Scott. There are some other guys, whether it's Kirby Yates or AJ Minter, who have come up in some conversations that I've had. So that could be something to look for. But yes, they're definitely in the mix for that. But it's a kind of a weird dance, like you were alluding to there when you mentioned the Dodgers, because it's, on one hand, you see the value of it. And I would argue that I'm with you there with, if the Mets had just maybe 1 or 2 more pitchers, perhaps they make a better run at that series. But on the flip side, a lot of teams like to save money, and they like to go the route of development and trying to hit on some guys who are either in their farm system or waiver claims or what have you.
What's the word? Surplus value. Oh, man.
Love it.
There's nothing like a good surplus value in a front office meeting. Will, great to have you on. Really appreciate it. Great work all offseason, too. Been reading all of your notes that you're putting together with Ken, with Katie Wu, with many others, Patrick Mooney as well. So check out Will's work on Twitter. Just type in his name. Otherwise, in The Athletic. Thanks, Will. Great to talk to you.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.